Welcome to Podnutz Pro, episode number. Matt, would you like to guess what episode this is? Because I just drew a blank. 28. Episode number 28.
Close.
I apologize. Welcome to Podnutz Pro. As I say at the beginning of every show, this is the show where we try to take you from home computer repair and bring you into the world of networking and server, small business and routers and servers and exchange and all the beautiful terms that most people tend to avoid. So I am Lalo from Podnutz Pro, of course, and BetterPCTech.com and a bunch of other different places like Door. But what's up, Matt? How you doing today, my friend?
Oh, doing good, Lalo. Doing good. Yeah, short week. Doesn't seem like it, but it is.
I know, and we're talking on the pre-show how it's amazing that you get one day off that Monday and it throws off like the rest of your week. You know, like it's beautiful because you have one day off, but then now you have 4 days to do 5 days of work. So
right, the amount of work doesn't change, unfortunately, just the number of days to do it.
I agree, man. I agree. So, all right, man. Well, good. Thank you for everyone in the chat room and those of you that are downloading this show or watching it live for joining us. Greatly appreciated. Mr. Matt, what is today's topic?
I want to talk about today what I spent part of my holiday weekend doing, which is some Exchange database maintenance, doing offline defrag of a 2003 Exchange database. Pretty common task you have to do, especially with O3, and that's what I was doing this past weekend.
Sounds like balls of fun. So I was at barbecues and I was at a pool party and drinking non-alcoholic beverages and hot dogs and ribs. You were working on Exchange, the database, huh?
Right. Luckily, not too bad because I did the prep work before.
Oh, sweet.
Just had to run a few commands. But I still had to be in front of a computer for a little while.
Now, for those folks at home that haven't really had the exposure, what would you, in a general term, describe an Exchange database to be?
Well, in 2003, the Exchange database is what holds all of your mail. It's one large database, actually a couple different files, but one database. So everything that users see in Outlook, all their inbox, calendar, contacts, it's all in one database. And in 2003 Exchange, at least for small business, the database can only be 75 gigabytes.
Now, if I remember correctly, it was 16, right? But you modified the registry to make that 16 into a 75?
Right. Well, the default is 18.
I'm sorry. 18.
Right. So most companies, you have to edit that right away.
Gotcha.
Because that limit's kind of ridiculous. So there's a registry key you edit for that, but I don't know the handy. I think I might have discussed that before, but we'll put in the show notes for that database key. It's a key you create, and you can just tell it your database size limit in gigabytes. Anything above 75 is ignored. So 75 is as large as it can be. Now, I tell my clients 70 is as large as it can be because I like to have a little bit of leeway if it gets that big to do some cleanup, which is what had to happen in this case.
Now, what happens if you allow it to get close to a 75? What after effects do you get?
Well, if it hits the limit, whatever the limit is, either the hard limit of 75 or whatever limit you set, it's just the Exchange store is going to dismount. So users will come in, they'll try and open up Outlook, and they'll get a little Outlook message, can't connect to server, or a server down or not available, something. No mail is going to come in or out when the Exchange store is dismounted.
Right, and when the store is dismounted, you know, because folks stop getting mail, and I mean everything will go down from as far as a mail point of view. So you'll definitely know.
Right, and you may not know for right away because your users. It usually takes the users a while to figure out the mail they're sending is not going out.
Right.
Because then of course, they won't get the message, and yeah. So it's funny that when I get these Exchange stores back online, when it happens, I always get an email saying, "Hey, can you call me? The email's down." In which case, I call them and say, "Is the mail down again?" And they say, "No, why?" "Oh, I just got an email that the mail was down." And they'll say, "Oh, I sent that when the mail was down." "Okay."
Oh, great. Thanks.
So that's what I usually do.
Okay.
Now, in this case, so what happens is whatever your limit is, I usually, in normal operations, don't set it larger than 55, 60 gigabytes. Because at that point, when it hits that limit, yes, they'll be down for a little while, so you'll get a call. But I want it to go down when it gets to that large, because I want to be able to, one, know that it's that large, because I can't monitor, or I don't monitor all of my clients' information stores unless they have a service agreement or pay for monitoring. So most of them don't do that. So I want it to go down. So I get a call, no email down. It's easy to see Exchange Management, the store is dismounted. It's easy to remount it and go look in the Exchange logs. The event logs. And in the event logs, it'll tell you if the current size of the store is 50 gigabytes. If this exceeds or meets the database limit of, let's say it's at 50 gigabytes, the store will dismount on a regular basis or something like that. So you can see how that's the reason that it was dismounted. So at that point, if it's 55 or even 60, I tell them, look, now is the time. The limit is 70. If they're at 55 or 60, whatever it is, the hard limit is 70. Once it hits 70, your mail is going to go down. So we need to do some maintenance now. So the first step, what I do is I tell the users, well, in fact, the first step I do is take the time to have some account maintenance. I look at all the mailboxes that are in the store, and I go through them with the office manager or whoever knows which users are valid and which aren't. So I can send them a screenshot basically of the mailboxes, and I'll say which ones are valid, which ones aren't. So the ones that aren't valid, right away we can reduce those. Either just delete the accounts and clear their mailboxes, or if they want the mail, I'll archive those out to PST and then delete the accounts. So off the bat, if your mail has gotten to 60 gigabytes, that might have taken, let's say, a year, 2 years. It's a good time to do account maintenance. Now, one more thing. Before I do any of this, I keep saying my first step. When you get to a critical size, let's say it's at 65 gigabytes or 60 gigabytes, I'm going to go into some settings in Exchange database, the retention policy. So the retention policy says keep deleted mail for 30 days and keep deleted mailboxes for whatever it is, 7 days, 14 days, whatever your policy is. Which means I've seen a lot of times where people just delete a bunch of stuff and then do an offline defrag, and it frees up no space whatsoever. Because, as we all know, when the user deletes the email, it's not actually deleted, because you can go in Outlook, recover deleted items, and it's still there.
Right. So
when they get to be this large, I change the retention policy down to 0, or maybe one day, or 0 days, depending on how bad it is. So in that way, when the users go and start doing their maintenance, and when I'm clearing out mail and deleting accounts, this stuff is not keeping around longer than I want it to. So change the retention policy rates down to 1 or 0. I don't keep it long, and then I'll go through the accounts. Once all of those accounts are done, I go into Exchange Management and I sort by mailbox size, and I send that to the office manager. And I usually do anybody over 2 gigabytes mailbox. I'll include in the little screenshot.
Okay.
I send that to the manager, and I tell them these people need to do the following steps. When I have it in the email, it says first step is to delete what's not needed. Delete everything that's not needed. Inbox, subfolders, sent items, and when they're done with that, delete deleted items. Because if you don't tell them, they won't delete deleted items, and they're still there. They're just in a different folder.
Right, and you'll be surprised when you pull up the report that Matt is talking about that shows you like the mailbox size. How some people have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 gigabyte the mailboxes, and you're like, what? What's in there?
Yeah, exactly. And they say, well, I don't have anything in there. Well, I sort by size first. I send that to them. But then also do another screenshot that's sorted by number of items in the mailbox. Because I can tell them, because they're going to ask, why is your mailbox so big? You'll see, inevitably, you'll see two users with about the same size mailbox. Let's say two users at 8 gigabytes of mail. One user might have 30,000 items in their mailbox. One has 5,000, but they're the same size. Now, why are they the same size? Because this one user who has 5,000 items probably has a ton of emails with attachments, large attachments.
Exactly.
And I explain that to the office manager and tell them, look, one, delete everything that's not needed. That's the first step. Delete that, delete deleted items. Then, if they're saving an email just for the attachment, save the attachment, delete the email. The Exchange database is not where you should be doing file storage. You have a limited database size. Save the attachment, delete the email. After all that's done, then I tell them to archive to PST files. And they normally want help with this. If they've never archived, this person has been with the company for 6 years and their mailbox is 10 gigabytes. I don't want PST files to be over 2 gigs either. So I usually tell them and give them the steps to archive maybe everything older than 2007 to one PST file. Then when all that's cleared off, archive everything older than 2008. So basically you get a year of mail in one PST file, which is usually a reasonable size as well.
And I definitely agree, but I mean that's a pain to walk somebody through, especially if you don't have one that can have a user that can just archive. Scares off a lot of people. I mean, talking about end users, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yep. So.
And sometimes they want me to go in and do it. So sometimes I have to go in and archive this mail for them. Some companies have terminal servers. So I can easily just log into the terminal server as different users and do it.
Okay.
Some don't. So the ones that don't, and it all depends on what they want to do. There may be 6 offenders who are using 10 gigabytes a piece. So that's a little bit easier to archive those 10 than have to archive 40 that might have 4 gigs a piece. But it's got to be done. Either I have to do it or they have to do it.
And for those folks at home, they're saying, like, what happened to your policies that your mailbox should only be so large and your attachments should only be so large?
Yeah, most companies don't do that.
Yeah. I guarantee if you have done this, I have put policies in place, and not the end users, the higher up, the people of ranking start to scream, we can't have that. You have to take it off. And you try to explain to them the possible, what's the word I'm looking for? The possible effects of doing so. And they say, I don't care. Take all the policies off. Of course, if these folks are writing your paycheck, you know, you got to take it off. So, and that's where you get these large mailboxes.
Right. And as the company gets bigger and bigger, this company, I'm talking to them, we may implement some policies on mailbox size. But she made a comment. She doesn't want to limit certain people, and the people she mentioned are the ones who had the large mailboxes. So I told her it's not going to do any good to enforce policies on people who only have 300 meg mailboxes. They're not going to care if it limits 2 gigs. So there has to be a compromise by the people in charge, or we have to do this maintenance from time to time.
Right.
And this has been an ongoing process. This company, I have been working with them for probably 4 months to clean their mailbox up because they just don't do it. They'll tell them, okay, it's done, and I save the screenshots with the mailbox sizes, and I go in again and I take more screenshots, and most times the mailboxes are bigger than before.
Yeah,
some are smaller, some are bigger, which means they didn't do it. They said they did, but they didn't.
No, that's true. And the last company that I had worked for, they dealt with CAD drawings. So the drawings were extremely large, and they did not want to use the FTP server. They wanted to do everything through email. So I would, once a month, I had to do maintenance on all these mailboxes because they would email, you know, these 20 meg like attachments, these maps, and it was like Matt said, the same offenders every month. And after a while, I just got tired of barking. So that was part of my monthly maintenance over there.
Right. And there's only so much you can do. I tell the clients email is not intended for file transfer.
Mm-hmm.
It's email. You're not going to shove a 50-pound box into an envelope and shove it and put it in your mailbox. You shouldn't be trying to send out 100 megabyte videos on email either.
You know, that's a good example. I think I'm going to use that trademark command.
So sometimes when they understand the problem, but they don't want to do anything to fix it. So I can't make them. I can consult and tell them this is what you need to do. And when they don't, we do the maintenance. So they've been complaining, or this has been a long process to get their mailboxes down. And I told the office manager I want everybody below 2 gigabytes because I don't want to take your mailbox down to run an offline defrag only to realize that it wasn't good enough. So I like to see everybody's mailboxes below 2 gigs before I run this defrag. So this took a while to do. And we actually had to go in and do 4 or 5 users because the users kept saying they were archiving, but they really weren't. They might have deleted 1 or 2 email items, but they weren't doing it the way it should. So one user in particular, he had an 8.7 gig mailbox. He kept saying he was archiving. He just said there was nothing else he could possibly delete. Deleted everything. Well, what he meant was I didn't delete anything because we went in and I said, okay, let's look. Do you need this? No, I thought I deleted that. Okay, well you didn't, so let's delete that.
Mm-hmm.
And we got it down to 1.7, I think, for his mailbox. So it's just you got to work with them. It's a process that needs to be done. Now, don't forget this is billable, so don't fret over this. You can bill for all this work.
Oh, sure. No, I agree.
And I see somebody in chat ask why 2 gigs. That's just a cutoff in the mailbox, and it's just a number I wanted to have everybody down so I could run a good offline defrag to compress the database. I don't set limits for mailbox sizes, so as big as they get. But to clean it up, I wanted to see it reduce in size enough to make it good to get free space back. So after all that's done, PSTs are created, and that's a different show with all these PSTs, which are annoying. But because one, you don't want them on. They're not supposed to go on the server. They're supposed to be local files, but they're local files. You're not backing them up. So the PSTs. There's no good solution for PST files.
No, that's all a beast all by its own.
No, and I would recommend the GFI Mail Archiver appliance, but a lot of companies don't want that either.
Right. So, I was gonna bring that up. That again, I come from a larger networking environment, and they have appliances that actually do the archiving for you that is totally transparent to the end user. But a guy with a small business probably won't get that appliance.
No, we have some, but a lot of them just don't want the expense. Now, if this keeps happening, they may look into it. But for right now, this is the second time I've done this company an offline defrag in a couple of years. Last one I did was it must have been in 2009. I looked at my notes. So it's not often. It takes me a while to get back up to that size, and they feel that the cost of the mail archiver is more than they would spend just having me clean it up once in a while. So that's their call.
Now you had mentioned that this limitation is in a change 2003. 2007, 2010 doesn't have a limitation. But is there a healthy size? Is there a size you should not go over? All the boxes I have administered were 2003, so I can't say I much have experience with 07 or 10. Is there a box that a size that you should not go over for your store?
No.
Okay.
And especially in small business server, then there's not going to be anything. You're pretty much limited by the disk space on the server.
Okay.
So you get a RAID 1 array that's 300 gigs. I think that's plenty. If you start filling that up, it might be time for some maintenance.
Oh, and we're talking about the offline defrag. I don't know if you had mentioned it, but how much hard drive space is required for you to even do an offline? Or let's start unless you were gonna get to this, Nate. I'll cut you off. The difference between an online and offline defrag.
Well, the online defrag just kind of clears up. It's nothing, not even comparable. The online defrag, in my opinion, doesn't really do much.
Mm-hmm.
It does some system maintenance, but it's not going to clear up the. When you delete email out of Outlook, it doesn't. It still leaves the white. They call it white space in the database, and the only way to reclaim that is with an offline defrag.
Right.
That's the main reason.
I think the online moves that white space to the end of the EDB file, where the offline, the defrag, you can actually reclaim that white space back.
Yeah, and that online maintenance, I believe, runs every night.
Yeah, I think by default it's 4 or 4 a.m. I could be wrong.
Yeah, something like that. So that does a little bit, but it's not a substitution for the offline defrag, which unfortunately has to be offline, which means your mail's offline, which means you'll be working on nights or weekends usually doing this, which of course is overtime. Don't forget.
Chat room says 5 a.m. on 2003. Thank you.
5 a.m. Okay, that's good. I knew it was before I get up. So. Oh, and one reason the PST, when we archive in the PST, I like to keep those below 2 gigs because they might have Outlook 03 or an old version of Outlook that if they just export to one big file, their PST file might get corrupted, their archive PST. So I like to keep the archive PSTs below 2 gigs as well because I don't know what version of Outlook they're running. Okay, so when all this stuff's archived, you're ready to actually run the offline defrag. And for this, of course, it's from a command prompt. So you have to run, well, here's what I do. Let's say, by default, your system file path for Exchange is going to be C program files exch srvr/bin, bin. That's the default system file path. Now, that's different than the database location and log file locations. I always move the database and the logs to a different partition, but I don't usually move the system file path. So you got to go to command prompt and browse to that directory, C program files exch srvr/bin to run this utility. Now, what I do, I browse to that directory in Windows Explorer. In the directory, I right-click, new shortcut, CMD, and then I edit the properties of the shortcut to start in C program files exch svr/bin. So when I open a command prompt right there, I'm already in that directory, just because I know I'm going to use it again later. So it's just quicker to make a shortcut to CMD right there. So once you're in this directory in a command prompt, of course, you have to go into Exchange and dismount the drive. So you go into Exchange Management, right-click the private store. I've never had a defrag a public store because most of my clients don't use a public store. So I'm usually concerned with doing the offline defrag of the private store. So right-click that, dismount it. Once it's dismounted, you can run the executable, or the script to do the defrag. Now, when you do this defrag, what it's going to do is it's going to create a temp database. So if you're by default priv1.edb and you've got priv1.stm, there's actually two files in the database, the edb and the stm, the streaming media file. In the 03, both of these files are part of the database, of the same database. The streaming media file is all the audio, video, and other media that's attached to the emails. The EDB is actually the message headers, text, regular attachments like Word documents, but no audio or video normally. So the streaming media file can be pretty big when people have all these attachments for videos and things like that. So you take the database offline, and when you run this, it's going to create a temp file. It's basically going to copy everything from the main STM file and EDB file to new ones. And once it's done, it's going to delete the old ones and rename the temp to what the other name was. That's what it's going to. That's how it defrags it, basically. It just creates a new file. So to do this, you have to have enough free space on the drive that you want to do it. It's going to be, I think, 110%.
Yes.
So if you're running and this is tricky because if your database is, say, let's on the H drive. Let's say you move this to H Exchange Server MDB data. You're going to run the ESC util, which is the utility to do an offline defrag, from the C drive normally, unless you change the system file path. So if you just tell it to do the defrag, it's going to create the temp file at the system file path location, which isn't obvious when you first do it. So if your database is on H, you think that the temp file is going to be on H also, but it's not. It's going to probably be on C. So if your C drive, let's say your database is 60 gigs, and you've only got 30 gigs of free space on your C drive, you'll see your C drive filling up, and then the defrag is going to fail. So there's a switch you have to use to say use the temp file on over here and not on the system file path. So watch out for that, because if it's 60 gigs, you might sit there for 3-4 hours, and then it's going to fail, and you're going to realize, oh, I forgot to check that system path. So
wow.
And the first time I did, that happened to me, and I thought, why is it put in on? And that's when I realized system file path. So the command is kind of long, and we're going to put it in the show notes. I always do a switch for the temp file, always. Even if I know the system file path somewhere else, I do it just in case. So in this case, my Exchange server database was on the H drive, exchsvr/mdbdata/priv1.edb. That's where my database is on this server. So I don't want the temp file being C drive, so I ran a big long command, which I can read, but go to the show notes for it. ESE util, that is the utility to run the database offline defrag. So it's ESE util space /D. Thank you, Computer Pro. He put in the chat. Yeah, but different path. So ESE util space /D for defrag. Then you're going to put the path to your database space /T for temp. Then the full path to where you want the temp file to be. Now, if you've got some kind of long path, you can put it in quotes. And normally the folders aren't named that way, but so ESE util space /D space H:/ Exchange server /mdb data /priv1.edb space /T H:/ Exchange server /mdb data /temp1.edb. So when you do this, you should get a little indicator bar, 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 with the progress. If you get anything else, something like return a jet error of 18-1811 or any kind of other error, you typed it in wrong. Most likely you typed in the wrong path somewhere. That's usually what you're going to get. A jet error 1811 is what you're going to see. So check your spelling, check your syntax, do it again. And I keep Windows Explorer open. Hey, there you go. Nice. So I keep Internet Explorer open. I'm sorry, Windows Explorer open to the folder where my database is and the temp folder is. Normally it's the same folder, hopefully. And I can watch them grow because I like to just see it. And that way you can know it's working. Because the indicator, as we all know, means almost nothing on Microsoft's indicator things. And you can make sure that your streaming media file and your temp file that's building is in the right place. If you don't see it, it's in where you think it's going to be, it's putting it on the system file path. So I like to watch it. Now, it's best if you have enough free space on the same exact drive. This one client, I had to do this offline defrag 2 years ago, and it did not have enough free space on any drive in the server to run the offline defrag.
So what did you do?
Well, I had to put an external USB hard drive in because it was filling up fast. And they didn't. Now the server had more space for more drives, another RAID array, but they didn't want to do it. So they had an external drive. They connected that. I used that as the temp folder. So when I did my /t, I did whatever it was, F:, and I just dumped a temp file there. That offline defrag, the database was 70 gigabytes then also, same server, but with the temp path being a USB drive, I think the offline defrag took over 7 hours to run.
And then again,
and it went from 70 gigabytes at that time to I think 33 gigabytes is what it went to after it was done.
and keep in mind these are 7 hours. The company but the email was offline. So again,
Right.
like Matt said, you're probably doing this in the wee hours in the morning on a weekend when it's an inconvenience there for you, but you'll be getting paid for it.
Right. And of course, they're going to ask you, emails down, yes. Does that include phones? Well, if you mean email on your phone, yes, that's still email.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
your phone won't magically work because the server's down. So it took 7 hours. And the difference was it was on a USB drive, slow USB drive. Plus, it had to move the files to that USB drive and then had to move it back when it was done. This time, we added another RAID 1 array a while back for their Exchange database. So on the same drive, on a RAID 1, some good, fast, SCSI drives, it only took an hour and 10 minutes.
Wow.
And it went from 70 to 27 gigabytes. So it recut it less than half after all the maintenance. And it was only an hour and 10 minutes. I told them they'd be down for about 7 hours because that's how long it took last time.
Right.
And it's hard to gauge this. It's the speed of the server, the speed of the drives. If I don't know how long they're going to be down and they ask me how long will it be down, I want to say, well, I don't say what I want to say, but I do tell them roughly 3, 4, I think I told them roughly 5 gigabytes an hour. So if it's 60 gig, I told them 12 hours. Now it only took 7. So my estimate in that case was high, but I'd rather estimate high than low.
For sure, because I mean, at the end of the day, you what's the saying? You want to over deliver, whatever. You know what I mean. But yeah,
Right.
you definitely don't want to tell the client it's gonna be 4 hours and you're there for 12, because now, now they don't understand why, and it just looks bad. So better be safe than sorry.
Yeah. So I think the first time I did, I told them 5 gigs an hour. Which would have been 12 hours. But it took 7, but it was still overnight. I think actually that time I started at Sunday morning. Because even on weekends, you'd be surprised people don't want their email down, even though they don't get email that time.
And you always have that one user that calls you or emails you, saying, hey, or tries to. It's like, it's Sunday morning. It's 5 o'clock in the morning. Why do you care if you can't get your news of the day, from whatever article you sign up for?
Now, also, a lot of times before we schedule this, of course, it's up to the office manager to do this. If she wants to send out an email to everybody saying the email will be down starting at whatever time. And with everybody having phones nowadays,
Exactly.
they're going to have email. Their phone might pop up and say, can't connect to mail server. Well, then they're going to call, of course, the office manager or me. So if they know in advance, starting 5 o'clock on Sunday, the email is not going to work, and yes, that includes phones. It'll cut down on phone calls to you that you've got to deal with.
I agree.
So a little bit advance notice. So after this all runs, everything should be good. You should get a 0. Should be say completed successfully. You have to go in and mount the database yourself. So you go right-click on it, mount database. Now I can see how big the database is in Windows Explorer, but I like to go into the event log. When you mount the Exchange database in the event log, it'll tell you how big it is. It says the database is currently 27 gigabytes. The limit is 70 gigabytes, blah, blah, blah. If it exceeds or meets the database limit, it'll be dismounted on a regular schedule or whatever it says. So I know that it's cleaned up. I know it's 27. So now I go in and redo the things that I undid. So I'll go in and set the Exchange database limit in the registry. I'll go back and set that lower. In this case, their database was 27 gigabytes, I set it to 55 as a limit. I don't want to leave that at 70 because I want to be notified well in advance when they hit 55 gigabytes, so I can start prepping them for the process again next year. So I set that back to 55 or whatever you want to set it to as appropriate in the registry. Dismount the Exchange store, remount it, because in the event log, it'll log again. It's currently 27 gigabytes. The limit is 55, so I know that took the limit. I know I did it right in the registry, so I can see that. Go and change the retention policies back if you want to. Normally you want to. So I think the deleted items is 30 days, I think, and maybe deleted mailboxes is 7 or whatever you want it to be. Set those things back. You don't want to leave them at 0 because you'll have to go back to your tape a lot more often than you should to recover deleted emails. And that's pretty much it. Of course, I say it goes without saying, but I've had people not test it. Send yourself an email. Make sure email works after you do this.
Yes, before you leave the building, make sure email works.
So I log into OWA usually, or if there's a terminal server, I'll open up Outlook on the terminal server, send myself an email reply. Good, it works. Because if you don't test it, it's not going to work. If you test it, it always works. If you don't test it, it never works. So test it.
As they're saying in the chat room, the method seems kind of archaic, and it is. But that's the way you do it in 2003.
This is archaic. 1978, 03. It's almost the same thing. Exchange Server 78.
I mean, you would think, and because before I did my first offline the defrag, if you look at the documentation from Microsoft, it's kind of intimidating. All the command line, the switchers, and what you gotta ensure you have, and free space. And as far if I don't know it, but there's no other way of doing it except what Matt is describing.
No, and the reason it's important in 03 is because I can't tell you, a server was put in 04, small business server, and they've never, if they didn't have a good tech, one, they're hitting the limit at 18 gigabytes. So they're dismounting, and I've had people. Here's the funny part: when it hits the limit at 18 gigs, I can't tell you how many places I've seen they just reboot the server and it works until the next day.
Right.
And then it's down again because of the nightly maintenance that runs. It'll say, "Oh nope, you're over the limit. I'm dismounting the draw. I'm dismounting the store." So when they come in, they reboot. Email works again, and this I've seen stores where the limit was 18 gigs, and I can look in the event log and see your Exchange database is 28 gigabytes. The limit is 18. You're over the limit, and they've been doing this for 10 gigabytes. How long did that take?
Sure. Or folks that instead of rebooting the box, they just write a batch file to stop and start all other services and bring the store back online. Yeah.
So you need to. It's important to know, one, that there's limits for the database, how to change those, which I think we've talked about, but two, how to reduce this so you don't have this problem. And it is a pain, but it doesn't happen often. Like I said, this client, I think they have 60 users, and I've only had to do it, I think I do it once every 2 years.
Okay.
And that is because they don't want to implement mailbox limits.
You know, in a perfect world, I mean, you know, some people do have it set up this way. You have a mailbox limit of, let's just say, 2 gigs, and you can say, okay, at 1.5, send them a friendly email saying their mailbox is almost full. Then at 2 gigs, you know, it sends an email saying that you can no longer receive or send mail. But I mean, that's in a perfect world. People start screaming.
Yep. And I've gone behind some people who enable journaling, which journaling is fine. I like journaling, but so what journaling does, it creates, you have another mailbox, and everything sent to received in your Exchange store goes to this mailbox. Now, of course, that's going to increase the size of your mailbox. So I've had people enable journaling, which just fills the store faster because they're not monitoring it.
Yeah.
And they don't realize they have to do this maintenance once in a while. So it's important to know how to fix it, because I've gone behind people who couldn't fix it, and now we're their IT people because we can fix it and they couldn't.
Agreed. And this Podnutz Pro number 28, I think, will be one of the most valuable shows because you will see this problem in the field. You know, I have friends who call me every once in a while and say, you know, my store is dismounting. I'm over a limit, and how do I fix it? And you know, now I'm just gonna give them a copy of this podcast. Here you go.
Yeah, and the most common thing is I see them typing in wrong, the switches, and it's frustrating when you keep getting those errors. So, and even I typed in it wrong this past weekend. I'm like, what did I type wrong? I forgot an R. I think I did SVR instead of SRVR. And it's just simple like that. But you get an error, you think, man, I'm typing this right. What's going on? So pay attention to what you're typing.
Yeah.
It can be frustrating.
And then if it fails, if you have a path with spaces on there, use quotations.
Yeah, use the quotes. The quotes. I like the quotes. And of course, very important to try and run it. You can't just open up Internet command prompt and type in ESEUtil. You got to run it from that bin folder, because that's where unless the bin folder's in your system file path, which it's not going to be unless you put it in there. Right. So I'm not sure why you put that in there, but I've seen stranger things. So that's an offline defrag. In 03, we see it more and more because the servers have been in service for a long time and they start filling up. So now one quick way is a lot of times just change the database limit. I'll see a lot of them that are filled at 18 gigs. Well, I just change the limit to 25 and say you're good now, if there's hard drive space on the server.
Yeah, I guess like we stated, it all depends on what kind of users that you have and what type of business, and you know.
Well, I've seen people set the Exchange database limit to, let's say they've got an 80 gig hard drive on the server and they've got 60 gigs used, so 20 gigs free space. And the Exchange store is currently 18 default. I've seen people go in and set the limit to 60. Well, it can't ever reach the limit because you only got 20 gigs free space in the hard drive. So I don't ever set the limit higher than the hard drive can handle.
Right. I think you give a good tip where you set the limit below what it can handle, so at least you are aware that it's getting to that point and you can do your maintenance that you described.
I'd rather the database to go offline before it completely fills the hard drive, because then you got other problems.
And then you can find them folks that like to forward that 10 meg like attachment to 500 people.
Yeah.
You know who you are out there.
I only sent it once. To 500 people.
Yeah.
That's another show with those ridiculous limits that are set by default in Exchange, where you can send it to what I think it's like 10,000 recipients at once or something. Something
like that. It's just something outrageous.
Yeah, there's no reason you should send anything to 10,000 people at once.
No, I agree.
You could probably set that to 20 and nobody would notice.
I agree. You know, it just that 2003 out the box was like, wow, okay. They let them do whatever they want. Cool.
Yep, it's a mail free-for-all.
Torrent. There you go, Timster. His BitTorrent via Exchange.
And then what happened, so we cleaned up this part, and that's another show completely on what to do with all these PST files. In fact, I have to deal with the user tomorrow or the office manager sometime soon, because all these people have PST files on their local computers now, which of course are not getting backed up. So I've got to do something with that. And what I'll probably do, there's no good solution for PST files.
No.
There's enough free space on the Exchange server on that drive that we have Exchange on. It's a large array. I'm probably going to create a share in there called PST files, kind of like a user folder. There's going to be a user folder for each person with their PST file in it, because you don't want Mary to be able to open Joe's PST file.
Yeah.
So it's probably going to be a permissions protected thing per user. That way everybody can have their own area for PST files. Hopefully they're not going to open them much. They'll just be attached to their Outlook profile and just keep it minimized, keep it closed.
We can do another show on improperly configured file. And permissions. Like, ooh.
Oh, that's definitely going to be a show. Permissions. Oh, jeez. I had a nightmare last week with permissions with somebody. I don't know what they were doing. I think maybe they were blindfolded and just pressing keys for permission. I'm not really sure. But
like, what if I check this inherent permissions box all the way down?
in fact, Lalo, that's going to be our show topic next week.
Permissions.
Setting
there you go.
permissions, because
Outstanding.
This happened. I'm serious. It was last week, and it was such a mess. It took me a long time to fix what was done with permissions on this server.
I agree. And you know, and it's funny that the people, if you haven't caught it, the people that call you up like, were you aware that I can get to the vice president's home drive, or you know, the personal drive? And you're like, really? And you just happen just to peruse the server.
Right. Yeah. Well, my main problem is and I hate to do that. I never like blaming techs before me, because I don't know the situation that the other tech was working in. So they may be, and I know users have asked me, can you show me how to, and this is long, we don't do training anymore, but this goes back to that same thing, we don't do training. Users have asked me, how do you set permissions? Can you show me? And I show them once, and they completely screw it up to when I get a call, no one can access anything anymore. And I said, what happened here? Who did this? Well, I tried to set permissions to block Joe from getting to this. Oh, yeah, that's fun. So that'll be a good show.
Or I always like when someone thinks that they're crafty and they take ownership of that folder, and then they go, well, I'm going to block Lalo the IT guy out. No, my small friend, I should take ownership back and block you out for a day. See how it feels.
Yeah, when they do these permissions, they always remove and they remove all the permissions, so administrators can't get in, system creator owner, all that stuff's gone.
Yeah, but great.
Yeah, I love it when that happens.
That would be a beautiful show next week. So.
I wonder if I can get that girl on to talk about how she does permissions. Yeah, and not blaming. Real quick, not blaming other techs. I don't like, and this is good for any tech. Whenever you walk into anything, it might be the worst setup you've ever seen on a server, and you might think, who was the tech before you? But you can't do that, because a lot of times it's not the tech's fault, it's the restrictions that the tech was working on under the people who own the computers, basically. So if the customer's telling you don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, and he might not be able to implement any changes to make it work the right way, so don't be careful with the tech. And that happens a lot because things don't work the way they want. So I might get a phone call and say, can you come look at this? And I'll look at it and I'll see a bunch of things that aren't configured correctly, and I'll say, I recommend this, 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 and this, and they'll go with all my recommendations, and then they start using us. But I've had it the other way too, where I'm telling the client, we need to do this, 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 and this. No, we don't want to do it. We don't want to do it. And it goes that way for years. And then they get another tech in there, and I know what that tech says. He says, this is all wrong. We need to do this, 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 and this. And it may be the same exact things I recommended, but they go with that tech because he's new. It happens all the time.
And I agree. And a lot of times you run into a situation where the tech before you maybe didn't exactly have the foundation to do what's good practice, you know. But a lot of times, especially in small businesses, the owner just says, just get it done. And, you know, unfortunately, you have to learn on the fly, which is not the most ideal situation, but I ran into, you know, it happens to all of us, you know, and sometimes we get asked to do, like, just things that we haven't done before.
Yeah, and if it's the owner that's been doing it, that's fine. You can blame him. But if it's another tech guy that they've been in, I don't blame the other tech guy, because I don't know what he was dealing with. I have one client right now where the server is ridiculous. It blue screens every day. The Exchange database is corrupted. Backups don't work. Nothing's working on this customer's server, but they don't want to fix anything.
They don't?
No, they don't. I said, don't you want to at least get the backup working? No, we don't. No, we don't want to spend the money. And now today the Exchange database is corrupted. And I said, well, okay, I'll need to run some utilities to repair the database. You don't have a good backup, so let me try and repair the database and I do what I can to get the mail back up. Oh, no, we don't want to do that. We'll just use our AOL email. Okay. Sounds good. I said, you know, your server's blue screen almost every day. When I log in, I always get a message that it blue screen. Oh, yeah, we just reboot it in the morning. It works fine. I said, do you want me to look at that? Do you want me to look at it? Because that's an issue. It's even more of an issue because you have no backup. So I'd rather have the server running as good as possible when you have no backups. Oh, no, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. So I can just imagine what another tech would say, another company would say if they came and look at the server. They'd be like, who's your IT guy? Right. What are they doing over here? But they won't let me touch a thing. They don't want to spend any money.
You know, and it's a shame because if they just let you do the work, you know, it's gonna cost them. But you know, they're running like a smooth machine, you know. So. Yep.
Yeah, they're gonna give up their domain name, give up all that, and just go AOL email. So. I thought that was pretty fun. So that's just be careful what you say about other techs. Now, some techs, even though they are crazy, just keep it to yourself. It's okay to think about it.
There's an ongoing chat in like the chat room, and Computer Pro, he had brought up about the permissions, so we'll give everybody a sneak peek. He does everything on the NTFS level compared to share, and someone is asking why would you do that? If I have a folder on the server called Podnutz Pro, and what I do is give everyone rights or on the share level, and then lock them down on the NTFS side, because NTFS permissions at the end of the day rule. So if I give everyone share, you know, let's say full control on share, and only give Matt and Lalo full control, only me and Matt can actually go inside that folder and access that folder where everybody else cannot. If you try to manage the share permissions like the NTFS, you'll be there all day. Because you have to figure, I mean, it just becomes like a nightmare.
Right. You got to go through what's the most restrictive, or are they cumulative? Right. Yeah, it's just, yeah.
So it's easier if across the board you just get everyone access to, but share permissions will just allow you to, the permissions are applied over a network if you browse to it, and then the NTFS is what you want to use to secure it down. So
right. Plus share permissions don't work locally either. So
exactly. But more on that next week.
Yes, sounds exciting.
I can't wait.
All right, we got a couple emails.
Yes, sir. Got one for Dwight, and he says, "Hi, Matt. Here's my situation. A customer has a Windows Small Business server, Service Pack 2. One of their employees set up the server and put users in Active Directory, and these users are not seen in the SBS console. The employee also used a self-signed certificate, and the customer wants us to configure Exchange and remote web workplace. Should I delete the users out of Active Directory and add them to the users in the SBS console, or continue configuration manually?" You have become the Dear Abby of the Technosphere. I keep up the good work. He is correct, the Matt. I feel like I'm talking to like a superstar.
Wow, that's okay.
I think that's an old SNL bit. Possibly.
Dear Abby, wow. Yeah. Do they still have Dear Abby?
I have no idea.
Okay, so on this case, this happens frequently when people are not used to using small business server. Yep. Remember, they don't like the wizards.
Don't like the wizards.
So if you go into Active Directory and add the user directly, it's missing a it's missing an attribute on the account that makes it show up in the server manager. So what you have to do, it's easy to have these show up. There's a wizard to fix not using the wizard. There's a wizard in SBS 08. It's called change user role for user accounts, or fix or assign, something like that. So in the user area, there's change user role for user accounts. You run this wizard, and you can select the accounts that you want to change the roles for, And so if Bob's not showing up in the console, you select Bob's account, assign him a role, which is normally going to be a standard user. Now, there's one part in this where you can either add user permissions or replace user permissions. If you've already had, if Bob's already in other groups and you don't want to lose that, you could do add user permissions, which means he'll keep his current security groups and settings and just add the standard role settings. If you do replace, he'll lose whatever groups he's currently in and replace it with whatever the standard user gets. So just be careful on those. It's a radio button, either add user or replace user settings. So once you go to that wizard, it adds the attributes to the account, and you'll see it in the console.
Okay.
So that's an pretty easy fix. And you can select more than one at once in there too. Now for the self-signed certificate.
Hey, Matt, and they're asking if that's the same process in 03 through 2010, or that just applies to certain.
The same in 2010. In 03, it's different. I replied back to him. He told me it was 08. In 03, it's a little more aggravating. You got to
okay.
do some other things, which there's a different process. There's no nice little wizard, but basically you have to edit the attributes for them to show up.
Fine.
And actually, you know what? In 03, I think it might have been a fix. I can't remember. Maybe it was a certain. Maybe it was R2, or maybe it was before. You just moved it to the SBS users OU, and I think they might have shown up. I can't remember. I think that might have been a fix in R2. I can't remember the specifics, but I've had that issue before in migrations where they weren't showing up, and I think maybe you just had to move them to the SBS users OU, and that may work. If not, there was some scripts that I had to run that fix the attributes. It's been so long since I've done it on 03. But yeah, it's possible in 03 it might be a little different. And the self-signed cert, well, okay, 08 is better than 03 using self-signed certs, but I still like the third-party cert. But if they don't want to spend $150 a year, which some people don't want to, in SBS 08, and I'm pretty sure in 2010, I think, if you go look and see users, and this is on the server, see users public downloads, you're going to see a certificate distribution package folder.
Okay.
So a folder named certificate distribution package. In there, there's an executable and a cert. So it's a zip file, I believe it is. But in there is something called install certificate application. You can take that, give it to clients, and say run this. It's a little wizard that runs. When they run it, it says, do you want to install on your phone or on your computer? If they're on the computer, of course, they pick on the computer. And when they say on your phone, I believe they mean Windows CE or Windows Phone, not like iPhone. So install certificate, you run that and you say it's on my computer, and then you do next, and it installs a certificate. And this does work well for remote web workplace. So if you're off-site and you go to the remote web workplace site, whereas before they got the warning saying this site's not trusted, you want to continue anyway, and it's all in this big ugly red.
Right.
When you do this, it does come up trusted, and it's in green, like any other normal cert. So
okay.
It does work for that. Now, so it'll work fine for a remote web workplace. You might still have issues with Outlook. I think it should work fine with Outlook, but I haven't actually. I've tested it with RWW and OWA, and it works fine with the install certificate application. I've not tried Outlook. And I say Outlook, I mean Outlook 07 or later. I don't think it's going to work with Outlook 03. Outlook 03 is going to need a real cert, a third-party cert.
Right.
So, but 07 and later may accept this install certificate application. So that's what I responded back to.
Cool.
Dwight.
Should I go on email number 2?
One more thing.
Yes.
And if it's SBS 03, SBS has something similar, but it's in the client app share there's a folder named SBS cert, and the cert's in there. So you could always take that and copy to the machine and install cert, but that doesn't work very well. It's there, but it doesn't work very well.
Is it hit or miss, or?
Well, Outlook 03, if you have Outlook 03, isn't going to work for that anyway. So if you're doing Outlook over HTTP, it's not going to work. And I've had it work sometimes with RWW and sometimes not. So it's not very reliable.
And
in 03, I tell them you have to get a third party cert. In 08, depending on what they want to do, I might let them slide with a self-sign. But in 03, it's not an option. Get a trusted cert.
At the end of the day, it's just much easier to get a cert.
Oh yeah, a few minutes. And with this, of course, with the trusted cert, you don't have to go and give this out to all your users. If you got 50 users, now you got to walk 50 people through installing this on every computer they use.
Yeah.
And how much is that time worth? A cert costs what, 150?
Mm-hmm.
So it might be cost feasible to just get the cert and be done with it.
I agree, because compared to the number of hours that you're going to spend, or you and your team, getting that done.
Now, if you're working for a company like you, Lalo, you might just go spend the cert out of your own money and just take a few hours, a few days off, saying I'm configuring all these certs.
I'm busy. Don't call me. I'll call you.
That's worth 150 a year, huh?
Yeah, exactly right. Oh man! All right, this next email, and let me take a sip on my coffee real quick, because to read this is gonna take a while.
Oh, yeah,
my
okay.
Waffle House coffee mug. This email is from Howard. I have a network that I am setting up that uses a Linksys WRT54G, a router, very popular by the way, with the wireless disabled. That is set up with an IP address range. The default IP is 192.168.1.1. Now I have a Belkin, then he gives the model, wireless router that I want to set up as a wireless access point. However, I cannot change the default IP from 192.168.2.1, so it's a different subnet. For some reason, it will not allow me to do that. When I set the router to AP mode, I'm not able to log into it. I wonder, so you can get to it and just not log in? I have to manually reset it back to the defaults so I can log back into it. Anyway, how can I get the wireless network to get IPs from the Linksys DHCP server or pool? Do I have to change the Linksys IP to 192.168.2.1 so they're in the same subnet, and the Belkin to 192.168.2.2, and I cannot change it to. I hope this all makes sense. I think we get the gist of it, and you're trying to put like the routers in the same subnet. I also have a TrendNet TEW-637. I have that router and I hate it. It sucks. It just sits there in the corner. I hate it. But anyways, that was working great until recently. It started slowing down a lot. Whenever I do a reset, it will run great for about 10 to 15 minutes and then slow down. It has something to do with the DNS resolution and running DNS bench, which showed that it was running real slow. I had that same access point and I had the same problem, believe it or not. That's why I just don't use it. But anyways, long email, and hopefully I didn't lose anybody there. But what did you suggest for Mr. Howard?
All right, this might sound mean, and I don't mean it to be, but I've thrown away. I guess keep the Linksys router and buy a wireless access point. That's what I do. One, because that router seems a little fishy. You can't change the IP.
Yeah.
You can't log into it till you reset it. So something's going on with it. But even if it did work, I don't like using routers for only access points. I would just get an access point or get a new wireless router. I mean, it's going to work a lot better. It's going to save you some headache.
It is. Cause I will tell you, I have a tub full of wireless routers that when I had a small business, I would go out and replace them, and these folks would be like, "Oh, just take my wireless router." And I've tried to make 2 or 3, you know, I was just bored with a nice cold beer, and it just like a headache. I'd rather just get a like you stated, a dedicated access point and make that work.
Yeah, I like to use things what they're supposed to be used for, and when I see more than one router in place, I don't like it. You're gonna have problems. So
yeah,
and if you wanted to make it work, I think it's strange that you can't change the IP.
I have seen. Well, he says that he can't change the default. I've seen it where you're stuck with a 24-bit subnet mask, like you can't make it anything else. I've seen that on some routers, but you should be able to change that default IP. That just seems kind of weird.
Yeah, and of course you have to worry about, okay, how is he plugging this in? Is he going from the Linksys LAN port to the WAN port on the Belkin router? In which case, the Linksys would act as his ISP to this router,
right.
So it should give him a IP on the 192.168.1 something,
right? And
then his LAN side would be 2 something, but then you're splitting your network into multiple subnets, which I'm not sure if that's what you want.
Right, and then if you had a bots on one end, it probably could not talk to the bots on the other end.
Yeah, and I've seen some routers that won't do anything unless you have something plugged into the WAN port. But then it's not active unless something's plugged in there, because it's expecting something there. So if nothing's plugged in there, it may not work. So he may be plugging into the LAN on the Belkin, and since there's nothing on the WAN, it may not be doing anything. I've seen that before, but in the end, it just avoid the headache. Just get an access point.
Is there any recommendation
for an access point? I like the airports.
I would tell you,
Express.
Yes, and I did buy one of those. I'm not using it because I changed how everything is configured in my home, so it's all wired. But it was quite simple to I set up, and it works great. I know Steve has one at his bachelor pad, and he loves it. So
yeah, and I got one over here because I have a wireless router. I'm about to get a watch card for my house, but right now I've got a Linksys wireless router, and of course when I got my iPad and new iPhones, I started getting drop-offs. So to fix that, I of course set my wireless router to, I think, G only. Got an Airport Express, set up the G only. G things connect to G, things that aren't G connect to the Linksys, and it works fine. So, and it's also got the built-in, so I got a printer on there, so I'm sharing a printer through there, which works great. So I also have my stereo hooked up to it, so I can play things from my iPad, my computer, my iPhone right through the airport to my stereo, which is nice. So
sweet.
For $99, it's a good device.
Yeah, I've for the folks that I used to do in-home service calls for, the TreadNet just gave me issues, or were just kind of flaky. And maybe it was just the models that, because a lot of at CompUSA you'll see like a TreadNet wireless end for like $22, and I just cringed when I would walk inside the house, and they're just flaky.
$22?
Yeah.
You know a router's good when it costs you as much as a meal.
as much as a few waffles and mugs of coffee at the Waffle House, right?
Yeah. So I'm getting a watch guard for my house, I think.
Are you for real?
Day or two. Yeah. Yeah. And it's not a new one, it's an Edge, but I've got a client getting a new one. They don't want their old one, so I'm just gonna. Normally I would keep it for the office for a backup, but I've already got office ones, backups for the office, so I'm gonna have this at my house so I can do some better filtering.
And your wife is gonna get mad. Babe, can you unblock me from this site, please? I need access now.
She might get mad. Yeah, I'll tell her to fill out the paperwork.
I need a change management item, please. For those
how will this impact your internet browsing habits?
For those folks that had in a larger environment, you have a change management item. So if I want to make a change that impacts the network in some way, shape, or form, I have to fill out paperwork. What's the change? How it impacts the network? Is there a backup plan? Hours? Have the users? I mean, there's this long list of information that you have to fill out, and it's like at times the paperwork to fill out the paperwork is longer than the actual change that you're gonna do.
Right. So I'm a creative form, and I'll let her fill out, and I'll just stamp denied on it. Get back to her. No, actually, my daughter would be more upset than my wife because my daughter gets blocked the most.
But very cool though, man. Anything else? Hey, any more emails to the table?
Well, I don't think so. I'm not sure if we read the one from Mark or not about CRM. I think we did. We may not have. We'll have to go back and look at our notes.
Okay.
If not, we'll read it. We'll read it next time.
Again, if you want to shoot us an email, Matt@podnutz.com or Lalo@podnutz.com. And Matt, I would say again, all the credit. He does a good job of answering these emails. And if you want to read it on the show, please state somewhere within the body of the email if we can read it on the show. There's no, we all here to learn. So at times, you folks take great gratification knowing that someone else is having that same problem. So.
Yes, and I want to say I checked on iTunes the other day, and I want to thank everybody who left feedback for the show on iTunes.
Awesome.
We appreciate it. So, if you've done it, thank you very much. If you have not done it and you want to help out the show, leave a review, hopefully good, but be honest, for the show. That would help out.
There you go. And we had someone do some show notes. Would that be official going on forward, or would that?
Yeah, I think he said he was going to be doing that.
Okay.
So
and I would like to give him or her the credit, and I forget his name, but he did a pretty good job with the show notes that he had submitted to Matt and I just got to talk to Steve. This is his podcasting network, and make that happen. So.
And it's Mark, by the way.
Mark, thank you, Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Mark.
You are the man.
Yeah, there was some good notes. So we just gotta find out how we're gonna put those on or where they're gonna put them on. So
yeah, and I'll talk to Steve about that. I meant to do it last weekend when we were doing the podcast webinar, which was fun.
Cool. Yeah, last week unfortunately we had to cancel. Some emergencies, but
it's all good, man. It happens.
Yeah, it doesn't happen too often to me because I just call him back the next day usually. But this person,
that's fine.
We were working on them all day, and we had to get, if they would have called after 5, I'm sorry, but they usually had a luck. But we were working on them all day, and we felt like we had to finish them. And
Matt, he had called me, and I heard wind in the background, like he was going about 84 miles an hour. Heard honking. Get out my way.
Screeching. It all worked out though.
Good, man. All right, well, I think that's the show there. Anything you want to say, Matt, to the people at home?
Nope. Thanks for listening.
Cool. And
look, my office phone's ringing. What time is it? 9 o'clock. People calling. That's funny.
Thank you, chat room, for hanging out. All the great comments and questions. And next week we're gonna talk about file permissions, because that's a subject that there's different ways of doing it. There's no wrong way, but some ways are just a little bit better than others. But tune in next week, and again, email us at Lalo or Matt at podnutz.com, and we can't wait till next week. So thank you, guys.
Yep. Good night, all. Thanks.